Getting started. Once you have logged into P4D via Platts Market Center, you will see this screen. There are three buttons: Create New Report, Open My Reports, and Video Tutorials. So let's go back to Open My Reports. You can see there are three specific folders inside of Open My Reports. The original is your master report. What this folder contains are the original master queries that you can use to interrogate the P4D data. So these reports cannot be saved over. Your company reports, however, are reports you or someone in your company has made and saved into this company folder for anyone inside of your institution to view. Those can be saved over or deleted. And finally, your personal reports are reports that only you can view from your login. And those also can be saved over or deleted. So let's go ahead and launch the one of these original master reports. I'm going to go with the volume master. You can see the initial load happens inside of the browser that you're working in. But I'm going to go ahead and suggest that you always hit this detach button. What that's going to do is launch this report into its own window, and then you're able to use as much screen space as possible to work in just the report you're viewing. Okay, the first thing that I want to highlight on this original report, and this is true for every single report you open, is that these static buttons along the top, this top ribbon, they do not change based on what report you're looking at or what tab you're looking at. These will always be there. You have your standard save, which is going to save over the report that you have open. Since I have a master query open right now, hitting save is essentially going to do nothing. However, if I made my own copy using this Save As button, maybe I want to put it in my private folder for only me to view, or I could switch it over to my corporate folder for someone else in my institution to view. If I make a new report, then every time I hit save after I've made that new report, it's going to overwrite the older version of that report. The world we live in analytically is a very Excel-oriented world, so we provide the option to export any view that you have to Excel. If I hit this export button, what the program is doing is compiling every single one of these tabs into an Excel workbook and sending it to my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit open here, hit yes, and let me just make this full screen for you to see what this report looks like inside of Excel. You basically have a static identical copy of whatever you were looking at sent to your machine. So it tells me what I was filtering on, it sends me the table view, and below it, it sends a static image of whatever I was charting at the moment. So you could take this and drop it into a PowerPoint or an email, something like that. You can also see that the tabs match the tabs in my initial report in P4D. So you could take these original views and compile them into a dashboard you like, save it, and if you're the kind of person who wants to work in Excel most of the time, you can continually export that to Excel if you'd like to. Okay, so I'm going to hop back to the actual P4D tool. There are a few more buttons here along the top that are important that never change. You have the refresh button. The reason the refresh button is important is if perhaps you resize a graph and it doesn't resize correctly, you can always hit that refresh button and it'll redo every object inside of your report to make it look good. Finally, you have a delete button here, so that allows you, if you're working in a report that is in your private or your corporate folder, that allows you to delete that report if you'd like to clean it up and get it out of that folder. And finally, you can see the detach button turned into a dock button. That's if you want to go back into the working window, your original browser. There's really almost never a reason to use that button, but it's there just in case you decide you want to do that. Okay, let's talk about the report layout in general. There's a consistent look and feel to the views across the product, and there are three primary panes. Each tab has a filter pane. You can see that at the top. We have a table pane here in the lower left, and then of course a chart that's visualizing that data on the right. These can be resized, as you've already seen me do, by clicking this dotted divider. You can resize these objects. You can even pick them up by the header bar right here and move them to a new location if you would like. So they're flexible Windows objects. That's typical of a tool like this. There's a set of icons at the top right-hand corner of each pane. They're important to know how to use. The first one here is this pencil. That's the detail settings. If you use the detail settings button, basically what you're going to bring up are the options that each object you're working in, specific options that object has. So if I click the detail settings of this chart, you can see, well, I can change the name of it. I can decide how much of it I want to plot. Maybe I want to add the numbers to the chart. These are typical settings that you might use in an object like that. So please feel free to explore those. You also have an option to lock an object. This freeze button is going to lock the chart view from the table view. So initially they communicate with each other. If perhaps you decide you want to freeze the chart that you're working in and not have it follow the manipulations that you make in your table view, using that freeze option is the way to do that. This refresh button is similar to this refresh button above, except for it only refreshes this particular object. Moving along to the maximize option, this is a standard Windows function. We're going to maximize that object to full screen. You can see now that I've done that this is actually changed down to a restore that sends it back to the smaller size. So that's a typical Windows function. Of course, the final typical Windows function here is the delete button. That would be something you would use if you wanted to get rid of the object entirely. So say you made too many graphs in a tab or too many tables, you can use this delete button to get rid of some of those. Okay, more specifically, let's talk about the actions that these panes create throughout your report. So starting with the filter. The filter pane allows you to refine the data from all historical data down to just the data you wish to view. It's essentially a query builder. Each button, when selected, refines the options below. So in this case, I've selected Europe, but you can see here if I make a decision, let's switch over to Asia. Notice how it sends that command through to the markets below, and that followed along. Switch this back to Europe. When you leave something unselected, so if we leave the market here unselected, you can see how it went ahead and queried everything. So keep that in mind when you're building your queries if you want to be very specific to make sure not to leave these unselected. Let's go ahead actually and take this query itself and zoom it in only to the Brent CFD market. It's generally best to avoid leaving everything unselected, as you could get yourself in a situation where you're querying too much data. Remember that this is minute-by-minute trade data, so you have the potential to query far too much data, and you need to zoom down in your query to the level of data required. One thing that's important to remember while using the filter query, the filter pane up here above, is that if you make a selection and you want to only, let's say for example, I want to only look at 2013. If you make a selection, notice how it appended 2013 to 2012. Well, remember to unselect your old selection, because we do allow users to query more than one year in a row or more than 1 month in a row, that sort of thing. So make sure that you unselect the data that you don't care about anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about the data table for a second. And I'm going to maximize this object while we talk through the functions of the data table. It's similar to a large pivot table. It shows high-level aggregated view of the data. It presents dimensions such as time, the date, the product that you're looking at, and the measures such as raw data values are reported along the top of these cells. Wherever an item is underlined, this means that it's aggregated and that further granularity is achieved by clicking on it. So for example, see this underlined 2013. I can actually click on that and go to a higher level of granularity. and continue to do so if I want to dive down deeper into the data. Returning to the higher level is quite easy. Just use this back arrow next to the choice that I made. One option that more advanced users are potentially going to want to use is the option of moving dimensions right or left inside of the table. And you can achieve this by using this drop down next to the dimension name and using the move right and move left buttons. So you can change the order of the dimensions in that table depending on how you would like to slice the data. A few more simple things on the data table view. You can use these plus signs naturally to expand or collapse the table to the level that you require. You can also, again, use this drop down here at the top of the dimension to expand everything at once using this expand members, or collapse everything at once using the collapse members. So here's what that would look like. I can expand all those months at once using expand. I could collapse them all at once instead of having to hit several plus or minus signs. One final thing on the table view, right-clicking on the table brings up several advanced options. For further detail on how to use these, please see Customizing the Interface video. That video covers key functions such as create chart and export. Okay, I'm going to restore this back to its original spot. Give this chart a refresh. Let's speak finally about the chart view. So I'm going to maximize the chart while we go through the functions in the chart view. This is a graphical representation of that data that we were just looking at in the table view. They communicate directly with one another. In fact, the only time that the chart and the table will not follow each other is if you decide to hit this freeze button up here in the top right. As long as you don't do that, the chart and the table will always mirror each other. Okay, using the chart. Right-clicking in the chart brings up several options. This is split into your chart settings as well as your basic charts and your advanced chart types. Those are tabs along the top of that menu there. And you can see that these choices that come up when I right-click in that chart are typical of what you would expect of the kind of manipulations you would do with a chart of this nature. You can, of course, change the axis settings. You can choose to flip how the chart is viewed. You can manipulate the type of chart. Perhaps you're interested in creating scatter charts or line charts. You can also change the colors using these palettes. Going back just to the chart itself, if you right-click on a data point, you get some special options, and this is going to allow you to drill in and out using the chart basically as a way to explore the data. So I can drill down further into this point that I picked. Let's say I want to drill down into February. You can see how that went to the daily view. Or you can similarly return up if you want to return that choice that you made. One thing that's especially interesting about that option is when I make a manipulation in this chart, it follows along in the table. So you really can use the chart as a tool to navigate through the data. And then when you want to export the data, well, that table will follow along. So you can always just use the table in the export based on the chart that you created. Okay, the legend box over here on the right, it gives you, of course, the color key to the elements displayed, and it also provides an option to drill down into underlined items. So the same that we said before about underlined items being able to drill down into those, you can do that in this view as well. So let's say you want to drill down into the CFD market and see those individual market participants. You can do that. And you'll see over here on the right, there's that return arrow in case you want to return it to a higher level. So it's highly flexible in terms of how deep you want to navigate into the data. You may have noticed that there's a drop down here in the upper left of the chart. It allows you to change which measure is being charted. We at Platts picked measures that we thought were the most useful, given the view that you naturally will open in the pre-baked query. But there are several other options. Using this drop-down menu, you can change to perhaps look at the traded quantities in a barrel of oil equivalent point of view. Or you can use this hand to the right to turn on more than one view. So we can actually go ahead and turn on the trade as well. And you can click these colors here inside of the legend to perhaps make one of them a line chart. So let's make the trade a line. And let's also send it to the secondary axis. So I'm going to click that color again, send it to the secondary. So that's a useful way to change the measures inside of your chart. A few more things about the legend box. If you click this double green tick, that's going to select everything. So let's drill down to all companies for a second. And let's turn on only the traded volume. So again, clicking the double green tick is going to turn on all of the choices in that view. Of course, to get that to go through, I click refresh. The grayed out double tick is going to unselect everything. And then I can select individuals if I would like to. And then to send that command through to the chart, just hit this refresh button right there on the right. That's the Getting Started summary. For more information on the views available within P4D and the differences between each, please see our other set of videos in the video tutorial section.